Perhaps the one who wrote this script isn't taking writing seriously enough. Nagoshi, Kikuchi, and Yokoyama stared at the words written across the front page of the script for Ryuga Gotoku crestfallen. Hase-san had been thorough in his criticism by leaving red penned notes across every page. A Yakuza would never say something like this. Don't you think you're not treating this whole scene seriously enough? The way you depict the red light district is so unrealistic. You have no idea of the importance of doing your research. Every note pointed to the same issue. The game lacked any sense of realism. Seishu Hase is a crime novelist respected for the sense of realism felt within his stories. His breakout hit, Sleepless Town, follows the story of Kenichi, a half-Japanese, half-Taiwanese man living in the middle of Tokyo's Kabukicho district. Hase's experience and research as a novelist made him the perfect man to ensure Ryuga Gotoku would be an authentic portrayal of Japan's criminal underworld. Yokoyama may have given it everything he could when writing the script, but it was obvious none of them had the experience needed to create a realistic story. When Hase-san was called in for a meeting to discuss what could be done to fix it, he explained to Yokoyama the thing he was missing was research. Their game script was an obvious fabrication created by men with no real-life underworld knowledge or experience. Pretty ironic for a research and development department. Using Detective Date as an example, Hase explained, "If this is the position he's in at this age, then he needs to be about this rank or it doesn't seem right." Even the Yakuza organizations themselves were lacking, with Yokoyama ignoring obvious things like rank and structure. If the organization's hierarchy is sloppily done or unrealistic, then it's not going to pass as entertainment for adults, is it? It took some time for Nagoshi, Kikuchi, and Yokoyama to finally understand that the plot they had poured so much attention into needed revision. Taking the advice of Hase-san, they dove into all of the areas of their story they didn't have first-hand knowledge of. And it was a lot. The team didn't really know much about the world of organized crime, or even the bars, clubs, and hostesses they were writing about. Nagoshi made the decision that more research was needed, and the three headed out to Tokyo's red light district, quickly finding themselves at an expensive-looking club. After opening the menu that was handed to them, they gaped in awe at the prices. Even this was completely different to the scenario they'd written. Nagoshi pointed to the menu. "This alcohol costs 300,000 yen. I wonder what it tastes like." "Well, let's try some." They timidly placed their orders and waited. Shortly after, a waiter returned apologizing that the bar was out of stock and the owner had gone to borrow some from another club owner. "Oh, so when they don't have any, they go and borrow some. We could use this for something in the game." It was a revelation. Hase-san was right. Field research would be required to create a modern-day, adult-oriented story. The three continued their research well into the night while coming up with new plot ideas and learning about the real red light district. When Yokoyama was asked about the taste of 300,000 yen alcohol in an interview, he simply replied with, "I had no idea." In the following months of development, Nagoshi-san brought the rest of the team out on the town to bond and research the realism of the city. He would send his research bill to Sega to be tacked onto the development budget. This was of course denied, and he ended up paying a small fortune out of his own pocket. This wasn't the only time Nagoshi was bad with money. It didn't take long for them to realize that his initial estimate of 1 billion yen wouldn't be enough money to create the game he wanted to make. They were already into development, and since a video game was the type of product where there wasn't much that could be done about the costs, Sega reluctantly and angrily agreed. Now that the team had enough money to actually complete the project and a realistic story ready to go, it was time to get to work on the game. Having the right characters was imperative to realizing the mature, emotional, and realistic story Nagoshi, Kikuchi, and Yokoyama had created. The chief character designer charged with this task for Yakuza 1 was Takeo Kimata. Kimata-san came from the Smilebit side of the R&D team, and despite working on other Sega games in the past like Gun Valkyrie, Last Bronx, and Panzer Dragoon Order, this was his first time taking on a leadership role. The first designs he presented to the team for Kiryu consisted of a more Western drawing style, and a design that made him look like he was a member of the Mafia, not the Yakuza. Thanks to Nagoshi's insistence that everything in the game be uniquely Japanese, those designs were changed to a more fitting style. It was first settled that he would wear a red shirt and a black jacket and feature an aggressive-looking face, but Kikuchi disagreed. Instead, Kikuchi argued that making him look too Yakuza-like would turn players off from the game. They softened up his face and toned down his intimidating looks. They struggled to strike the right balance of simple clothing that could still be recognized as Yakuza. Eventually, the team was able to settle on the clean and simple costume design we still see today, Kiryu's iconic suit. Haruka was much more difficult to design. There was just as much drama between Kikuchi, Nagoshi, and Kimata while designing Haruka as there was with Kiryu, which is interesting since he was the main protagonist and she's an NPC. It was hard to show that she's not someone who's financially blessed. If we went too overboard trying to make her look poor, she would lose her charm, Yokoyama said in an interview for the 10th anniversary book. Although the team considered her to be at an age where she might like to wear nicer clothes, the situation she was in prevented her from being given more of a showy outfit. They settled on a design that would both show her to be a cute character that would encourage your protection while still conveying her strong will. Goro Majima had perhaps the most dramatic transformation during development. In Yokoyama's original scenario, he was depicted as a skinhead with his hair shaved off. He had a serious face covered with a birthmark and loads of piercings. The initial design was basically that of an insane, terrifying man. As the story evolved, so did the character. At first, crazy was his only defining characteristic, but as time went on, his own unshakable values and even some humanizing moments transformed him into the character and design we see in the final production. Nagoshi and Kikuchi both had say in the design of all the characters, but Kikuchi was the one who came up with the idea of using a real tattoo artist to do the designs for each character's tattoo. Likely inspired by his work on Jet Set Radio, where they contracted actual graffiti artists to create all of the street art used in the game. Still, Kikuchi was concerned that his idea would be too much for their Japanese audience. Despite the shift in focus to realism and accurate research, they may have been better off using a more generic design from their concept artists. Kikuchi's concerns stem from the stigma associated with tattoos in Japan. During the Edo period, they were used to mark and shame criminals. Later, during the Meiji period, the practice was outlawed completely. These days, being tattooed in Japan, while legal, still carries a great deal of social stigma. This is especially true of the wabori, or traditional Japanese style tattoo. Wabori are almost exclusively associated with the Yakuza. Even in a video game that's about the Yakuza, depicting these traditional tattoos was somewhat taboo, and there was fear it could be shunned. After all, even non-traditional or Western style tattoos face discrimination in Japan. For example, many onsen, or hot springs, ban entry if you have any kind of ink. Because of this stigma, Kiryu's iconic tattoo is not typically the focus of the Japanese marketing materials, and was even kept somewhat secret. This is especially apparent in the case of the first Yakuza game. Later in the game, while getting his tattoo retouched, it's spoken of in reverence to bring to light the fact that it's not merely a gang sign, but the embodiment of Kiryu's way of life. Kikuchi spent his time researching different tattoo artists by hunting through various specialized magazines. Eventually, he discovered the works of Katsuaki Kitamura, who was a seasoned tattoo artist that at the time was working out of Yokohama. After seeing that it would be a perfect fit, Kikuchi wasted no time getting in contact with him. Kitamura-san has worked with the team ever since to personally design each tattoo featured in a Yakuza game. These days, Kitamura-san goes by the name Hirotomo, but it was a long road to go from tattoo artist to wabori master. Hirotomo began tattooing in 1992 as a Western-style artist. In 2001 though, he finally decided to learn the traditional Japanese style. It took years of training for him to be able to create masterful designs like Kiryu's tattoo. Success wasn't just in the form of being featured in a video game though. Hirotomo now lives in California, working at State of Grace Tattoo, where he works to spread the traditional Japanese tattoos to America. In an interview he said that he hopes one day, maybe when he retires, that he can return to Japan and see tattoos exposed in short sleeves and hot springs. When they started working together, Kikuchi presented Hirotomo with a proposal for using his skills to create a unique tattoo for each central character. But it was Hirotomo himself that suggested each tattoo be tied to the character's personality and destiny. Nagoshi and Kikuchi agreed, sending over concept art and CG renders of each character, along with descriptions about each of their roles in the game. Hirotomo-san got to work and produced the 4 iconic pieces used in the game. Kiryu's tattoo of the Oryu, one of the 4 benevolent animals, whose good nature and kindness are equaled only by its rage. Dragons are respectful and kind, but crossing one will almost certainly release its fury and destruction. Nishikiyama's tattoo depicts a leaping carp. The legend goes that if a carp can swim to the top of a certain waterfall and leap through the dragon's gate at the top, it will become a dragon. Fitting for a man trying to surpass the dragon of Dojima. Futoshi Shimano, the head of the Shimano family, bears a tiger on his back, symbolizing his ferociousness and strength, a beast that rules the ground. And Yumi Sawamura's Queen of the Night flower, a beautiful flower that blooms only one night each year. Notice Majima's tattoo isn't mentioned here. His full design wasn't actually revealed until Yakuza 2. In fact, the tattoos you can see from under his coat in Yakuza 1 don't match his final design in later games. Now that they had their unique, realistic character designs and ideas for their story in place, it was time to micromanage the other details that would go into the making of Yakuza 1. There was only one problem. As it turns out, Nagoshi once again underestimated the costs involved with his project. Sega had already sunk a lot of money into creating the game, and it was becoming clear that it still wouldn't be enough to see it to completion. For a third time, Nagoshi and his team had to create a presentation and request a higher budget. Okamura-san, the head of the consumer division at the time, held the purse strings. He wasn't just a little bit upset at Nagoshi for requesting more money, he was furious. I've never seen him so angry before or since.